I encourage everyone to take a moment and breathe and take a tea cheers with a Ajiri tea. A Ajiri tea recognizes the beauty in shared stories and shared opportunities. Ajiri sources award-winning tea from Kenya, employs women in the region to handcraft the labels, and sends 100% of the profits back to the region to support orphan education. Save 10% on your order of Kenyan teas and coffee with the code BeautifullyHuman at ajiritea.com. AJIRIT.com. Tea mugs up. Hello and welcome to the Beautifully Human podcast. I'm Nick Sheesby. In this podcast, I speak with beautiful humans from all around the world, sharing with you their incredible stories, revealing the power in every human story, to spread love and humanity to a world that is in desperate need of it, to show that we can all connect in beautiful ways, no matter where we come from or what we look like. What you will find out is that we are all beautifully human. Let's all be beautifully human. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me on the Beautifully Human podcast. From wherever you are at in the world, it's super awesome to have you here. Today, I'm hanging with Rachel Astarte, and we have a beautiful conversation. She talks about all the beauty that she's putting into humans in this world with her programs. We talk a lot about laughter. We talk about comedy and a lot about travel as well. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. If you enjoy this podcast, follow on Spotify and on Instagram at the Beautifully Human Podcast. Rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcast. It helps get these episodes out to more people, and that would be super awesome. So please enjoy this conversation. So I love to start these off with a very big and broad and overarching question and let you run with it and just take us where this conversation will lead to and say, tell me the story of your life.
Oh, okay. Well, sure. I was born in DeKalb, Illinois, to two academic parents, and we very quickly moved to New York State, way upstate. I like to say we lived in Canada, New York,
Yeah.
because we were like right on Lake Ontario, very close. My father was a poet and a professor of poetry, and he died in 2001. My mother is an actor, a writer, a director. She is more active than I am. She's 82 years old. She's
Wow.
still doing theater. She's amazing. She's just sold a couple of plays, and she astounds me. So and very, very inspirational. So I grew up in a very creative household. I also have two sisters, one older, one younger. So I'm the middle kid.
Yeah.
And and yeah, it was really lovely to grow up in a household where it was very creative, and so I actually started my journey as a writer first. At the age of 4, I started writing poetry, and then I was on stage for the first time at 5. And so
Wow.
so it was, and that was it. I was like, that's what I want to do the rest of my life. I'm done, and the writing part of it has endured. I'm still a writer. But the acting, well, it's a difficult business,
Yes.
and I had a really wonderful comedic acting troupe in New York City in the early aughts, and that was a lot of fun. But now my acting career is kind of reduced to just doing voiceovers. So I do voiceovers as well, a little my little side gig, and I love that. It's one of my favorite things in the world to do.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So what happened was that, when you're in the arts, it's about communication, right? It's about connecting with other people. It's about sharing the human experience. And what I found after a while was that writing my books, novels, screenplays, poetry, nonfiction, journalism. I did the whole thing. I wasn't reaching people as deeply as I wanted to. So I decided I would go back and become a life coach.
Mm.
And this was shortly after my son was born. And and that was great. But then what I also began to realize was that I was doing something akin to therapy on
Sure.
top of life coaching, which is illegal, right?
Right. Yeah.
I can't do that. So I thought, let me just go back to school and become a proper licensed therapist in New York State, which I also did. So 5 years after all that, that epiphany, I said, okay, fine. I'm now I've got all my ducks in a row. So it's wonderful. I get to do life coaching. I get to do therapy. I get to do writing. So all of my loves have kind of blended together, and that's where we are today.
Wow, that's so awesome. I love that. One thing, when you said where you were born, I don't know if you saw me,
I
but
saw
I shot
that. What was
up.
that about?
My grandparents lived in DeKalb
Oh,
for
yeah.
for a very long time, and my grandfather worked at Turner Tools. There's a plant there.
Wow.
He was the plant manager there for a little while, and it was cool. I never realized it once he left, but I've been in the music industry for 15 years, and there's a big trucking company called Upstaging that is now based out of that same plant where my grandfather used to manage. And I had no idea. And I woke up on a tour one morning in DeKalb at that place, and I was like, "Oh my God, I used to come here as a kid all the time." And it was like all
Wow.
those memories flooding back.
Flashback.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
God, that's amazing.
yeah, so that was why I was like, "Oh wow, DeKalb. That's a fun
Yeah.
place for me to remember, just going to my grandparents' house when I
Yeah.
was
See,
younger."
I don't remember. I was 6 weeks old when we moved. So
Wow.
it just,
Okay.
that's,
Very
so it's
short.
forever on my passport and my birth certificate, but that's all I know. I drove through there once. I was living in New Mexico, and I was moving back to New York. Um, and I drove cross country, and I took a detour so that I could go, be
Yeah.
in DeKalb and drive through it. But of course, I have no memories of
Sure.
the place. Yeah, that's amazing.
Um, so when you started writing poetry at 4, what was the poetry like then?
My poetry, or in general? Like,
Well,
yeah.
yours, like what were you coming up with at that young of an age?
Yeah, so I had the best teacher. I mean, my father was an incredible poet, and he was a student of and a proponent of what was called deep image poetry. So it's something akin to what we might now see. I mean, I guess the most popular kind of deep image poet would be Rumi.
Okay.
And almost everybody knows who Rumi is. But the idea of talking about things that are really difficult to describe in words, and so sometimes it's just the simplicity of a simple, a peach that you're eating, or just, how does it connect to our human experience? So the first poem I ever wrote was very short, and it was called Blue Jays. And it goes like this: Blue jays in my mind, when they fly, I sing. That was the first poem I wrote, you know.
That's
So,
fantastic.
and it's just that kind of what is nature doing around us, and how does it make us feel? And that's basically what it was. I mean, I didn't have a lot of life experience at 8 or 9, so I would write about what I knew, growing up on the farm where I was, or playing with my friends, or my purple bike that I loved. I mean, those are the poems I
Yeah.
wrote.
I just love that because I think most kids' minds are that they go wandering, and they, especially with what's around you, what you know. I mean, that's what kids do, or they create these new worlds. But I love that you had someone so creative above you to kind of funnel that and show you how to make that into something.
Yeah, he was a very, very special human being. He was a mentor and a teacher to so many, uh, so many people. And And I'm pleased to say that, I got to actually take a few of his classes when I went to university, um, and it was great because I made such great friends who are still my friends today, and they understand like his style and the way he taught. And it was, so it was really wonderful. He left this earth way too soon, but
Sure.
but we're all very, very blessed, to have had his tutelage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so good. Um, all right. So starting acting such a young age too, you have to have some pretty funny memories from your acting career.
Hmm.
What kind of stuff were you acting in when you were super young, and then like kind of moving forward, what did you get into as you progressed through that?
When I was very young, my mother was the English teacher slash drama coach at the local high school, and she was putting on a production. And she asked me if I wanted to have a little line at the beginning of the play. And the first line, was about a bunch of kids being told a story. And my line was, "Are there monsters in it?" And so she asked me, "Can you say this line?" And I was like, "Sure." So I did. She said, "Can you say this line in front of a lot of people?" And I'm like, "Sure."
Yeah,
And a ham was born.
right.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't do a lot of theater acting. I did a lot of in-school productions when I was very young after that. But then of course I once I hit high school, I was all over it. I was doing every production. I was, president of the drama club, and then um, did actually start doing some, I lived in a college town, so I would start doing some college productions as well. And then I ended up getting my bachelor's in theater, and actually left early. I took a semester off to go on a professional theater tour through Scandinavia,
Oh, cool.
taking Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie, which was amazing. So it was my first professional gig, and I was 19, so it was kind of cool. Oh no, I'm sorry, I was 18. I was 18, 19. Yeah.
That's amazing. Where all did you go in Scandinavia?
Well, we went through Sweden, Finland, and Norway,
That's
and
so cool.
yeah, spending about a month each in Sweden and Finland, and then about a week in Oslo. I don't remember because it was dark all the time.
Yeah,
We'd get up to set, because we also did our own, moving of the set, and everything was very low budget. But we would get up early in the morning before the sun had risen, get to the theater, put everything together, do two shows, come out, and it was dark again by 4 o'clock.
yeah.
So I didn't see the sun.
Yeah, it's very strange when you're in that environment. And I was there. I lived in Denmark for 2 months, and it was on the flip side of it. But I've been up there when it's 3-4 hours of light, and it's really tough to get used to. It's also tough on that flip side when it's 21 hours of daytime.
True.
It's
Exactly.
very
Yeah.
weird.
Hard to go to sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Haven't
Um,
experienced that.
so what kind of horror stories do you have, like of just like ridiculous times on the stage?
I mean, there's everybody's nightmare, right? Where either you forget a line or something like. Usually, I wasn't too bad about that, or you forget to wear pants. I didn't do anything like that.
Right.
But I do remember doing a college production, where there was a very important prop. We were doing a Sam Shepard play, and there was a very important book that had to be placed on the table because we were going to talk about this book and use this book for the entire scene. And either the props person forgot to put it there. So the lights go up, we're starting the scene, and we're all looking at each other across the table, go, "Where's the damn book?" Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so I pretended that I was very angry, and I slammed my fists on the table, and I walked off the stage, and I went to the props table, and I brought the book, and I slammed it back on the table, and just like made up this line about like, "Here's the book we were going to talk about," or
Yeah.
so,
Damn
I
it.
don't know. So, but it was terrifying because we're just looking at each other like a car is about to hit us.
Sure.
What are we going to do? They're audience members. So things like that, lots of stuff, audition stories that are crazy, I mean, I do remember one time I finally got an agent in the city, but she was used to representing models, but she also did talent. And she sent me to an audition, and I walked into this room, and they're like these 6 foot tall gazelle women, and I'm 5'2", and I look like me, you know what I mean? And I had no idea why I was on this call. I thought it was a theater or film audition, but it wasn't. It was a modeling call. And so the guy asked me for my book, of all my photos. I was like, I don't have anything like that. They actually still saw me and took photos of me, and I was laughing because why? Why are you doing this? But I guess they didn't want me to have wasted my time. But horror stories.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I can imagine you walk in like,
Yeah, so something doesn't belong here.
Yeah. One is not like the other right now.
Yeah.
So when you started to make your shift out of like acting and everything, and then how did your writing blend into what you're doing now?
Oh, it's a great question. Well, everything I've always written from the beginning has been about human experience and about, what do we go through as human beings? So I was writing fiction, I was writing poetry, screenplays. I have a master's in creative writing, and screenwriting was my area of focus because I love movies. And so my main characters were always going through some kind of life shift, or some, grappling with some life issues, which always intrigued me. It was always to me about the internal struggle. So when I wrote my book, Celebrating Solitude, this is before I became a life coach. It was just my life kind of intersected with my work. So I thought, I'm at that point when I first wrote the book, I was, nearing 40 years old. I was single. I was living in New York City, and I thought, my God, I may very well end up alone the rest of my life if I don't find a partner. So I better be okay with that.
Yeah.
I better find out a way to have fun being alone. And so I wrote Celebrating Solitude, and that, which is, I know you're not on video, but that's the book right there. And it got me thinking about how can I help other people, right?
Yeah.
To deal with whatever their life issues are, rather than writing a novel about it, or a screenplay about it, or even a piece of nonfiction about it. So that's when I decided, or a couple of years later, I decided maybe I should start looking into coaching. And that's what started it in that way. And then I started writing a column for Elephant Journal, which is pretty much a yoga magazine, but it's online, called Let's Get Intimate, where readers would ask me questions about relationships, sex, sexuality, and I would answer their questions. So that's still there and available on the interwebs for people to read. So I got to really bridge the healing work that I was doing with the writing, which was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, it's really beautiful that you get to take your passion and then go inward with yourself and then bring it back out and be like, okay, I'm surely not the only one that's feeling this way. So let's open it up and I'll write something for people to help them. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it became really clear to me that a lot of people are suffering on their own, and there's no need for that.
Yeah, and especially in a big city. I mean, it's very easy to slip through the cracks. And I mean, even if you're in creative fields and you're surrounded by people in the theater or acting, or even in the music industry or whatever industry, you can still be like the popular shiny person and then be home like, well, damn it, I don't have anybody here.
Yeah, exactly. And
So,
but you have yourself,
right.
and that's kind of what the book is about. But that's also what the core of my therapeutic practices is about building that healthy foundation of self so that you are able to give back to the world as your best and highest self. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, quickly into my story is a little under 3 years ago now, I was at the beginning stages of liver failure
Mm.
from my massive drinking habit. And what really started me down my beautiful road of recovery was self-empowerment and self-love, and really truly being like, okay, I do want to live. I want to exist in this world,
Mm.
and I love myself. I
Mm.
don't want to die. So steps along the way that made that empowerment happen more and more. I mean, I attribute all of everything that I've done since that time, and how well I've done with my sobriety because of that self-love and that self-empowerment.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and you put it very well. It's like this choice that you make. I want to be here. I want to contribute, and I have something to say and something to offer the world, you
Yeah,
know. And what, if I can ask, what woke you up to that? A lot of people, when there's addiction involved, and there's something that they they aren't happy with themselves, or they're not happy with their circumstances. So what was that aha moment for you?
my aha moment was a very scary one and a very real one, where I was fully jaundiced and I went to the hospital and I was told that I might not have another night to live at
Wow.
33 years old. So it was a very drastic, and I tell my story now as a cautionary tale of,
Mm.
you could be having fun and you might think you don't have any troubles, but this really can happen to somebody. Because when you're going through it and you think you're invincible, like we all do at certain points in our life, I wasn't thinking, oh, one day, just after my 33rd birthday, I will be in the hospital and be told I might not have a night to live because I drink so much. It's not
Yeah.
something you think about. So had that not happened, I would never have had an aha moment.
Mm.
But thankfully, my body was like, cut this shit out, dude, and let's go a different way. And then luckily my mind jumped on board, and I kind of like, we all went together forward past it, which was
Yeah.
really nice. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing what self-empowerment and self-love truly does. And I mean, it's a big reason why I had a blog called Beautifully Human, where I just asked questions and I just let people answer them, and I
Mm.
would laugh and I would cry every single one. That's why I start these off with, tell me a story of your life, because there's so much power in love and joy and beauty and sorrow and all of that in everybody's life. And
Yeah.
it's very empowering to be able to tell your story and have somebody listen to you.
Oh, I can't agree with you more. I mean, it's one of the things, I work with couples as well as individuals in my practice. And I think, and maybe this is oversimplifying it, but I'd love to hear your take on it. I think that one of the reasons people desire to be in relationship with another is to have someone hold their stories
Totally.
and to share them, not just to create them. Because, when you're with someone a while, of course, you create stories, but to sit down and be able to say, let me tell you about the time this happened, and have someone just be able to hold that and know part of your history. That's a beautiful thing,
It is. And to have someone that loves you enough to celebrate that too, where it's
Yeah.
not like, oh God, there's Nick telling his
Oh,
story
yeah.
again. But
I've heard this one.
which does happen in
Of course.
relationships, of
Of
course.
course. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that it might be oversimplifying it too, but like, I truly believe that, like, we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard, we
Yeah.
have our stories, we have our life experiences, and it feels good to talk about them. I
Yeah.
know when I go and guest on podcasts that I get the mic turned over to me, I can blab for forever. So I know that, like, it is a really nice balance to have somebody to, yeah, know your stories and keep them going.
Yeah, it's part of the tradition of storytelling. That's what I think. That's what's so great about your blog, the way that you just allow people to have that forum and be touched by it. And I think, when I started writing and acting, we didn't have the internet. That's how old I am.
Right.
And So for me, I just wasn't able to reach people fast enough. And that's to me, it's one of the beautiful things about this particular technology is that we really can connect um, in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's always amazing when I think back to just anybody who got massively popular back before technology hit. I mean, I'm in a generation that I remember when the internet came in. I was old enough to remember the AOL discs and dial up.
Oh,
So
yes.
I was young, but I do remember pre-internet.
Mhm.
And it's fascinating even to think of inventors and just people's minds without this computer. I mean, the fact that we're talking on this is really incredible. But then I think to all the people that created stuff, and then like the authors that got well known, or the poets or whatever. It's really amazing to think of how widespread it got, because yeah, like you said, it wasn't quick. You
Yeah.
had It took a lot of time to
Yeah.
spread.
Yep. And for me, it wasn't fast enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, or broad enough, and but this is, yeah, there are some positives, I think, to the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, there's good and bad. I see both. It's
Definitely,
it's one of
definitely.
those where sometimes I think it's just way too fast and we all just get too like, whoa, squirrel, and we're looking somewhere else.
Right,
And I mean, we
right.
can always find a bazillion different
Mhm.
topics or videos or whatever to listen to, watch. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like any technology or anything. It's how you use it, and anything can be abused. This pen is a beautiful writing instrument, but I could certainly find a way to abuse this thing somehow. Poke
Totally.
it in my eye or something like that. But I think if the technology is used correctly, it can save lives.
Definitely. Um, it's kind of kind of a good transition. Just talking about like here, there, and everywhere. I loved when I looked on your website, you had a bunch of different healing levels that you work with. Could you tell me about that?
Yeah. So, not surprisingly, as I have gone through my life, there have been different healing modalities that I've picked up along the way. Writing is certainly one of them. Hypnotherapy or guided meditations. I'm a shamanic practitioner, so I use shamanic work as well for those who are interested. Um, and anything that's spirituality based, because that's a big part of my practice as well. Um, and sometimes I put them all together, but it really depends on the patient and what speaks to them, because one of the things that's really important to know is that, and people have this misunderstanding of what therapy is. um, at least the way I practice it, um, I'm listening very carefully to the human being and how are they receiving things, and how are they, what is it that they would align with. So even though I put all these healing modalities, aromatherapy and all this stuff, yes, I can bring those into our practice, but not everybody's going to want them or need them,
Right.
right? I have some patients where we do straight talk therapy because that's what they are comfortable with and that's what they need. I have others where we will take an entire session and do a shamanic journey. I'll have, others where we do some journaling and some talking and meditation and that kind of thing. Yeah, so it really depends on what each human being needs, and I just try to bring whatever modality is right for them, and it's collaborative. I say, how do you feel about doing this, or do you keep a journal? um, I might suggest, hey, let's pay attention to your dreams for the next couple of weeks and bring those in,
Yeah.
and see what they're trying to tell us.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. A beautiful way to do it, because everybody's reaction to the world and their stressors is all on them. Like we all have stressors, but our reaction and the way we're feeling is very much singular to ourselves.
Mhm.
So I think that's a really beautiful way. And I think it's a really good way to break it down for people that are kind of terrified to go and talk to somebody, where they think of just laying on a couch and someone's just like tapping their pen over there, and like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
old school way of doing it. And it's
Right,
like,
tell me about your mother. Yeah.
yeah, let's talk. But I think that's really such a good way to do it, of like what feels good to you. Because I know when I'm going through shit in my life, and I'd rather have somebody come and say, let's talk about it, or what works for you. Because similar, back to my story, I didn't do AA. I didn't do the typical route. I just went to a one-on-one alcohol counselor. Her
All
name's
right.
MJ, and she is amazing. She is such a wonderful woman. And it was fantastic. We would talk for the first 40 minutes about everything we needed to talk about, and we'd get gritty. And then for the last 20 minutes, we'd talk about music that
Mhm.
she got to see when she was younger. And it was amazing. And we just bonded, and I just felt so comfortable and open and vulnerable with her. And that it was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. It was
Mhm.
somebody that had no idea who I was, and generally just wanted to help me.
Yeah, and treat you like a human being.
Yes, that's the biggest part. To
Hmm.
see me as not somebody who had thrown their whole life away, because I mean, I almost did, but I was working my way away from that. So, yeah, just to be seen as a relevant human being who deserves to live. And that's massive.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, a lot of people, and I just saw something on the news today, and a lot of actually therapy is getting more traction these days, because as people are having, after the pandemic, reentry
Yeah.
anxiety and all of this, and we're seeing a lot more therapy apps and things like
Yes.
that. So some of the stigma is fading, but it's really important for people to realize, yes, you're going to have some of those therapists who are very clinical and are very, by the book, and they're just going to, they're trained to do what they do. There are also many of us who are a little bit more like MJ, who are a
Yeah.
little bit more able to have a human conversation with you. Um, and that experience, like, neurologically changes your mind, about, like, oh wow, somebody's actually sitting here listening to me and exchanging stories with me, and this doesn't feel like therapy at all.
Totally.
But it is, because you're still able to have someone to talk to, who knows how to help and guide, but isn't treating you like a, you know it's the reason I don't like to use the word client.
Mm.
I like patient. My spiritual advisor does that. It's what he calls everybody his patients, and that makes sense to me, because client is sounds to me very transactional and very cold.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
um, but anyway, so yes, it's about the human aspect for sure.
I mean, just on my side, where people would say, well, what's this interview going to be like? And I'm like, well, first off, we're not having an interview, we're having a conversation and we're just hanging out. Like, I just say, you're a beautiful human that came to hang out on my podcast, just to have a conversation. Because yeah, I mean, I don't want it to sound transactional. Like, thank you for the interview. Now, see you later.
Yes,
I'd rather it be just, yeah, a human touch to it.
for sure.
The one that I was curious about, that I wanted to hear your take on, was you have humor on there,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
I think is fantastic. But I want to hear it from you. What's
Oh, yeah.
your
Well,
side?
comedy is my first love. I when I started, you know, being this little being that I am, um, I fell in love with comedy. I mean, from a really young age. And I mean, there's a story. Talk about a story in my family. But how this happened was, my mother was a. I mean, I used to laugh and enjoy funny things all the time. But my mom used to bring home old films from the library at the school where she taught, and we would have like movie night. Yeah, she'd bring home a projector, and we'd show it on the wall. And so she would bring home a couple comedy reels of, Laurel and Hardy, or, Charlie Chaplin. And so the kids would watch the comedy, go to bed, and then the parents would watch whatever feature film she brought home, Deer Hunter or whatever, so there's a story where I'm sitting on this little kid's chair, a tiny little chair, watching Fatty Arbuckle. I don't know if you know Fatty Arbuckle, but he's trying to, this is old, he's trying to fry a fish. It's a black and white comedy reel.
Okay.
But the fish is alive. So it's flopping all over.
Sure.
And he's trying desperately to keep it on the pan and put it on the fire, and it's flopping off. And he's, I apparently started laughing so hard that I fell out of my chair. I think I was about 5 years old. And to me, that was it for me. And comedy became my lifeblood. I mean, whenever I'm feeling down, I know exactly which comedians to go to. I'm a little bit of a stand-up geek. I love stand-up comedy.
Same.
I myself have only done, I did some stand-up for a while, but a lot of sketch comedy. That's my wheelhouse. But I love comedy and I love comedians. And I honestly think that they are holy people. Yes. I believe that they are. And if I ever have the time, I'm going to write a book about the history of comedy, starting from the ages of, the very first jesters, and even before then, like, the shamanic funny man, whatever, the medicine man who makes jokes, because it's so healing. It's so healing. And the job of a comedian is to look at what's going on in the world, filter it through that. And I'll tell you, there can be no stupid comedians. You have to be smart to be funny.
Absolutely.
And they look at what's going on in the world, they filter it and rewrite a very human experience and make us laugh about sometimes the most painful things. But they're also, they're also the town criers. They're the ones who tell us what's going on in society. The original jesters were, go out into the world, come back to the king or queen and make them laugh, because and the jester had a very difficult job, which is, here's what's going on in the country. I'm going to make you laugh about it, but I also have to lampoon the king. As the jester, my job is to make fun of you too.
Yeah.
And it's a fine line, because it's the king, that if you're not doing your job, if you're not funny, if you're not relaying what's actually going on in the kingdom, oh, the people are starving, let's laugh, they need to know, if you're not doing your job, you get fired or killed. If you make fun of the king too much, you get killed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a difficult job, but also, there's a reason why of the 9 muses, there is a muse of comedy, Talia. It's because there is a really sacred element to comedy, and obviously the very healing element of laughter. In India, you can go in Mumbai, in the park, I think it's once a week, and they have laughing yoga, where all you do is laugh for 2 hours or whatever it is. And I've not done it when I was there, but I have seen it. And it's just, there's a reason for that, right? So yes, on my website are some of my cherished favorite shows. I'm obviously, I was a huge Robin Williams fan.
Yeah.
And when he died, part of me just died as well. But George Carlin, now, if you think now, like Reggie Watts is amazing. As a musician, you would love Reggie Watts.
He's incredible. Yeah.
Oh, you know him. Okay.
Yeah.
Bo Burnham is another musical goofball.
Yes. Yeah. I haven't seen his newest one, but I love his stuff.
I haven't either. I'm saving it for a special day.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think
comedy, yes.
I absolutely love comedy as well. So that's why I wanted to ask you about it. And I think it's so cool too that you went into the history of it, because I think about it a lot, but I hadn't thought about it like that with the jesters and all that. And I'm like, oh man, that is such a cool history of where it came from. And I mean, I remember when I was super, super young, and some of the stuff I was laughing at was like Mr. Bean and like Faulty
Yes.
Towers.
Oh my
And
God.
that was
Yeah.
like what shaped me. And then like the first time I saw Monty Python the Holy Grail, I was changed forever.
Forget it.
It's
Yeah.
forever my favorite movie. There will never be another movie that I love more than that movie.
Oh
And I
man.
was in fifth grade, and I can vividly place myself in that moment. That's how much it hit me at that time.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I was such a geek that in ninth grade, I had my little Monty Python clique, and we would get together at my father's house and just watch Monty Python together, and then go home and write sketches. And
Amazing.
and I'm still friends with these geeks too. And I love that. I love that, Monty Python brings us together, man.
Yeah.
The British comedians. I was a huge Anglophile too in high school too. So, Ab Fab and, Jennifer Saunders, freaking amazing. French and Saunders, if you can catch some of their old stuff, Don French and Jennifer Saunders, amazing, amazing. Oh, but this is a whole podcast that I could talk about.
Yeah,
comedy.
right.
Yeah.
I remember telling a friend of mine that I would there's many times, not recently, but like within the last couple of years, where I would fall asleep watching stand-up comedy.
Mm,
And I told him, I was like, it puts me in such a good mood to fall asleep to, because
yeah.
I go to bed laughing, and I feel better when I wake up in the morning because I fell asleep laughing. And
Yeah.
it actually spawned this whole game that we keep playing, where he was like, there was one night I just started cracking up laughing because I was up playing video games at 2 a.m. And I just imagined you laying in bed, cracking up by yourself. And so I wanted to just be like, hey, Nick, send me a photo. And then, so now anytime we think about it, he can write or I can write, and we just type photo, and we have to take a photo immediately of whatever we're doing.
Oh, that's
And
hilarious.
it's been going on for 2 years because I told him that I fell asleep listening to stand-up comedy, and he thought it was so funny that he imagined me laying there just laughing my ass off in a bed.
I love it. That's fantastic.
But it
Yeah,
was
gotta
it
be
was
playful.
literally to fall asleep feeling
Yes,
in a good mood.
I agree. I mean, I make sure that one of the last things I watch before I go to sleep is something funny.
Yeah.
It's really important. I'm a huge Family Guy fan,
Yep.
so I'll watch some of that just because it's so smart and silly. But yeah, and I have a really soft spot in my heart for stand-up comedians because um, they work so hard. They work so hard, and
Yeah.
I uh, I will go and watch like the worst newbie comics and just yeah.
Right.
Because if they make me laugh at all, I'm so grateful because they're trying, and what a beautiful art form it is. Oh, and if I can just put another shout out, Eddie
Totally.
Pepitone. If you don't know Eddie Pepitone, you have to know Eddie Pepitone. You have to
All
find
right.
his it, I think the last big special was For the Masses, but there's a beautiful documentary about him called The Bitter Buddha.
Okay.
And I highly recommend him because he's the jester, man. He talks about what is really going on in the world. And he doesn't pull any punches, but he's funny as hell. And it's sad and it's funny and it's sad and it's funny.
Yeah.
But he's so smart and so good at what he does. So I'm putting that out there.
All right.
I want him to be the comedy laureate of New York, of the country. Oh, that's something we should bring in. I think the comedy laureate.
That would be incredible. That'd be so rad. Um yeah, I have wanted to do stand up, but I haven't done it yet. But it's one of those things where like I've been to so many that were kind of cringy, but yeah, I did laugh a
Yep.
little bit, and I'm like, but dude, you're up there, or
Yes.
whoever you are, like you
Yeah.
are up there. So good for you. You took that step. Like that's a big leap, because to be universally funny is not easy.
Yep.
Like you can make yourself and your partner laugh or your friends, but
That's right.
to
And
be
that's
funny
why
to the masses, Not an
You
easy thing.
have to have hats off to those people who can get up there and even try.
Yeah.
And I think that they're all blessed people. You know, here in Rockland County where I live, there wasn't a there is now, but there was at that time a comedy club. So I talked to my friend who owned a bar, and I arranged for a comedy night once a month, and comics from the city would come to Rockland County to work out new material.
Totally.
I
Yeah.
hosted it. That was the only time I ever did stand up because I was the host, and it was really hard. I had been literally a professional comedian for years, but stand up's a whole different animal,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I'll try it one day. It's still on my list of like, I just got to do it. And where I think I would be good is if I just went up and didn't plan anything, but also that's like the worst possible thing to do, I feel like, is just not go up with any thought process behind it.
Yeah, get a solid 5. All you need is
Yeah,
5 minutes. That's really not too hard. Get a
true.
solid 5 of stuff that you know you've worked it, and it's good. And it doesn't have to be, you know, you can improv, but it's good
Right.
to have a goal of where you're going.
Yeah,
Sometimes even you're so great with the storytelling, you could even do just 5 minutes of a great story, and that's
true.
fine, you know.
Yeah, I like that. I like that actually. I hadn't thought of it that way. Um, all right, I'm going to shift gears. You brought up traveling, and this is a question that I always like to ask everybody during the podcast is if I came to you and I said, Rachel, I have a plane ticket to anywhere in the world. Obviously, COVID restrictions are not in play.
Oh, that's
Where are you going with that ticket?
I always go back to India. That's my spiritual home. Anytime I have money in my pocket, that's where I go. And I do want to see other parts of the world, right?
Yeah,
I'd love to go to New Zealand. I'd love to go to Australia. I'd love to go to Japan. You know, but my soul and my soul belongs to India, and it's just been that way. And right now, you know, speaking of the pandemic, with everything being as awful as it is, my heart's breaking.
yeah,
But yeah, that's my second home. And if I have the ticket, that's where I'm going.
yeah. I met a man in Germany, and I go to Indian restaurants all over the world, mostly because it's very easy to eat vegetarian or vegan at those
Right.
places. So I tend to go to them because it's quite easy for me to eat, but I just love the cuisine anyway. And I met this guy, and I don't know what part of India he was from, but he was one of the employees there, and we got to talking and just hit it off. And he was like, "You must go to India. That's where your people are." And I was like, "Oh, dude, like, can you just email me when you're going next time? And then I'll just
Yeah.
go with you and you take me to the places to see. And can we do it that way?"
Yeah.
And I would
You
love
know,
that.
the first time I went, I didn't know anybody. And I just said, I'm going, you know, and I went to Mumbai, and I spent about 10 days there. I did know one person. And this is sort of a funny story. Again, single lady in New York City in my 30s. So I was I was trying to meet people. So I was actually on a dating site, indiandating.com.
Okay.
And so I was meeting a lot of Indian guys, but there was this one Belgian dude on there, and obviously they're like two white faces in all of, you know, in all of this you know, the pickings. So I immediately contacted him, and I was like, what is your story? Like, why are you
Yeah.
on Indian dating? And he said, well, I'm actually living in Bombay right now, and I'm trying to find, you know, a girlfriend. And I said, oh, cool. Well, I'm thinking of going out there. So he said, well, come, I'm here. So, you know, so I actually went, but I didn't, you know, you meet somebody online, you don't know what the story is.
Totally.
This man was so sweet. I got myself settled in, and he came on his moped and showed me around, and took me to places and introduced me to some of his friends, one of whom is like my brother to this day, you know, so things happen for a reason. But the first time I went, I really didn't know anybody at all. And I spent a lot of time alone, just getting to know the city myself, which was really, really special. So
I love that.
don't be put off by not having a guide right away.
Yeah, no, I definitely wouldn't. I just was like, if you're going, dude, I'm jumping with you. But I loved going and just exploring. It reminded me of, as we were talking, I was thinking about this memory I had. I was walking in Copenhagen, and I was by myself, and I was like, I was single at this time, and I was like, man, you get those moments where you're like, oh, I would love to share this with somebody,
Hmm.
similar to what we talked about earlier
Yeah.
of having that connection and someone to tell that story with. And it was pretty soon after I'd gotten myself healthy, or I was working to get healthy, and I was just walking, and I was like, man, I had that moment of like, I wish I had somebody here. And then I was like, but life is about beautiful moments. And then I looked up exactly where I stopped, and there was this doorway, and it led to nowhere. There was no door. There was just this cut in the building, and like a tiny little sign, and it just said moments on it. And I was like,
Whoa.
okay, all right. I don't know what you're telling me, but I'm with it. Like the universe is
Nice.
talking to me, and
Yeah.
I'm okay being by myself. Like I can share this story, or I can just really truly enjoy this for myself. And I just kept walking around Copenhagen. I got on a bike. I had a friend's bike, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, I love going and exploring. It's my favorite thing. It's the thing I've missed the most during COVID, was
Yeah.
not
I
being
would have
able
to
to
agree.
go and get into different cultures and experience that.
It's so, so important. And that's the thing. I mean, I'm a an introvert, and and I'm proud of being an introvert.
Yeah,
But that's the thing I miss the most as well, is being able to yeah, it's the culture, and learning other cultures, and smelling other smells, and seeing visions that you don't have in in our own culture. And it's so important, so important for us to be able to really connect in that way, in a way that we can't do on the internet,
yeah,
um, there's nothing like the smell of the airport as you step off the plane in Bombay.
right.
It's just, and it all hits you. It's just like exhaust and incense and things probably rotting somewhere, and the smell of the sea.
Yeah.
And it's just that I wish I could bottle that scent, but yeah, people would say, really, like, you wouldn't think that your happy memories of India would be the smells, but they really are. They touch me deeply. Anyway, but yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Travel.
And I always think of hearing other languages like poetry. I don't know if you feel that, but that's how I hear them. I don't understand them, but I love being in different cultures and just letting them all float around me. And I wish
Mhm.
I understood them. I wish I had the knowledge of every language. That would be
Yeah,
amazing. But I
that would be.
do. I just love getting there and just hearing all of it coming at you. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, there's something very dreamlike about it. Um, you know, when I remember the first night that I landed in Helsinki, and took a nap from jet lag, and went out and took a walk, and I couldn't read any of the street signs. I was like, am I still asleep?
Yeah.
It was very trippy,
Yeah. Finnish is a
but beautiful.
very different language.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's, yeah.
And I think there's something really cool that happens when you travel as an introvert. I think it comes off as a respect, and you're not the loud, obnoxious type of, I'll just say American, because that's
Mhm.
typical. But I think you get into really cool scenarios even with that, even if you're not searching them out, because of it. It's kind of like it comes off as respectful
Mhm.
almost, because you're not like, oh, here's my American culture. You're like very
Right.
timid, and like
Hmm.
I feel like you're open to more because of that when you travel that way.
Yeah. You don't really have anything to prove or to assert. You're just being receptive.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, that's the whole purpose of traveling, is to learn, shut up and learn,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a that's a great one. Um where or what was the biggest, where was the biggest or the most surprising place you've been to?
The most surprising place? Um, it's a great question. Um, I actually think the most surprising place for me was a rural village in India. The last time I went there, I was working for an NGO. I was writing a documentary film script for them to help them get money. And part of the work was that, and this was in Udaipur in the north, and there was a town called, or a village called Kulyari, where the NGO had a satellite office. So we would go out there, and it would be, I think it was an hour or so, hour and a half, in the back of the worst, most broken down, like, army van. You would have to wrap up because the mud was just flying at you,
Yeah.
and um and I loved going and doing field work there, but I remember the very first day that I went, we went into this town, and there was a small school with children, dirt floor, just like you see on TV. And the children were so happy to see us. Um, and they were trying to practice their English, and I looked, and there, some of them weren't even wearing pants, they were just sitting on this floor and counting to five in English and trying to show us how happy they were that we were there. And I looked through the schoolroom, and there was like a water buffalo, like in the back, just kind of hanging out, and these children were so earnest and so impoverished. It surprised me, but I went back into the van, and I just burst into tears because I was not prepared for how human it all was. And they wouldn't have known, like, this is what they know.
Right.
Right, they're in school. How cool is that? They're not in a field working, which is part of the work we were doing, is getting the young women of the household to go to school instead of have to go to work. And so, but the amount of, I think I just got hit by the amount of humility and the amount of joy. I loved working with the children after that. Once I got my shit together, and I, shed all my white privilege or whatever, and could actually get down and do the work that needed to be done. It was a real culture shock for me. And it was beautiful while also really, really painful,
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say that's a really, yeah, that's the way I would have put it. Beautiful and painful of seeing the joy, and like you said, not knowing any better, but then like in your mind, what you can, like where we come from, and what you've seen, and what you were given as a kid, and what you had, and then to see humans living, and that's what they have, so they don't know any better, and
right.
it is really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think there was even a little tinge of shame, I think, in it for me too, is
Totally.
just like, who are you, lady? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then I felt bad, and but it was a good cry, so got over it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean the fact that you're there and you're helping them learn English, I mean that's giving them a new superpower.
Mhm.
Language is a superpower. So I mean if they can learn English and start to communicate more with people outside, I mean that's a really beautiful thing to
Yeah.
help with.
I mean, I study Hindi, and to this day, I'm still learning, even though it's been, I don't know, over a decade that I've, well over a decade, almost 20 years now, since the first time I went. I've studied Hindi, and every time I would try to practice it while I was there, they wouldn't they wouldn't speak it with me because they wanted to speak English. So I just watch Bollywood films now.
Perfect. Oh, that's amazing. All right. I have two last questions for you.
Okay.
And the first one is, what would you want the world to know about you?
Um, Well, it's going to sound so like I'm pandering to the podcast, but that I'm human, you know what I mean? That I have the full range of emotions from, from feeling very weak to feeling very strong. And um but also, more importantly, we all have that, and that we are all connected to the divine, all of us. So that's something that is really important for people to know, that I walk around believing that there is goodness in everyone, and that and there's also real crap in people too, and we have to embrace all of it.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And it doesn't. I mean, with my podcast name, it does help the human part, but I felt that I think your vulnerability and your honesty and your openness and your creativity, and I've truly enjoyed speaking with you and getting to know you and hearing your stories. So I appreciate the humanness of you.
Oh, thank you. And this has been a pleasure, absolute pleasure. Not an interview.
Right. It's just
A
a
convo.
chat. Yeah.
Yes,
It feels better that way. I don't want
it
it to
really
be
does.
like, hey, okay,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
come back. Um, all right. So last question for you. If you had the ear of everybody in the world, what would you say to them?
Um, I think I would say what I said before. You are connected to the divine. You are meant to be here. You have a purpose. And part of the fun thing about being a human being is to figure out what that is. And maybe you don't figure it out till your deathbed, but that's okay. The journey is worth it. It's so much fun. Find out who you are, celebrate who you are, and enjoy what it means to be fully human.
Yeah. Yeah. Live your life, be you, take
Yeah,
chances,
yeah.
go to India, make a difference there.
And
Go,
don't
go.
worry about everybody liking you. That's silly. Nobody's, it's not,
Right.
it's not you. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Right. Right. There's
Mhm.
a lot of people out there. We can all connect and get along. And if someone doesn't like you, then
Yeah.
just let them be.
The general rule of thumb is, if you're not hurting yourself and you're not hurting anyone else, go for it.
Yeah. Live it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so fantastic. And I feel like when we started scratching the surface of comedy and everything, I feel like we could talk for hours and hours
Oh,
and hours. But
thanks.
I appreciate your time and for you hanging out with me and
Absolutely.
having this chat.
It's been quite a pleasure. It really has. So thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. All right. See you.
Thank you for listening to the Beautifully Human podcast. To hear more beautiful stories from beautiful humans, follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at the Beautifully Human Podcast. Peace signs up.